Uh, voice. So I wish in some ways I could start the course where we end it. Because in my mind, those are some of the more compelling topics, the ones I get a lot of questions about, and they're topical throughout the semester. But I don't think we would be able to appreciate and like work with the content as well had we not had all of the lead up, because a lot of what we learn about are things that are studied in other disciplines or other subfields or by other sociologists, but they're not incorporating certain contextual factors, largely speaking, settler colonialism. That is something we've spent a lot of time talking about this semester. And so my hope is, if we think of the last couple of weeks, we had missing and murdered as kind of the segue between gender and trauma in many ways, because that's almost the canary in the coal mine, that we are all sick, but our missing and murdered numbers are the flag by which we see our sickness. So if those numbers went down, arguably that would be an indicator of our health, broadly speaking. Complicating that, though, we know is this historical trauma layer. Now we've got indigenous resilience. Hopefully it seems a little more living and breathing to you after last week. Sits in the corner like a ghost. I love it. Higher self watches on. But I am going to give you guys a taste this week of my work. I think that has also come up in different ways, especially the missing and murdered work. But it'd be no stretch to say that the work we have read all this semester is almost the rationale for the work that I do. Why is it that I ask the questions I ask? Why are the things that I'm looking into important to me? In many ways are a direct reflection of a lot of the things we learned about week to week. If you'll recall the place unit, when we read from Wilson and Sharkey, and we kind of got to learn about how sociologists have described place concentrating outcomes in certain places over time. The reservation is absolutely a place where that has happened, yet we have, up until now, and my work, not considered it through that lens. I need to hurry up and submit my fucking book, but I just got done reading all the feedback from this style editor, and it's so amazing to say that I had so much writing trauma that I waited a year to read shit that was only good, but I couldn't. I was so afraid. I was procrastinating. Also, I had to work some shit out before I could come to it. But to read, actually, that he wants me to drop all the preamble, that in some ways I could start the story here. It's important enough to start the story here, and it matters to start the story here. I didn't do that in this class. I don't know if I'll do it long term either, but I want you guys to appreciate the work you'll learn about this time and next time through that lens of many threads kind of coming together, some of which were entire weeks in this class. Now, if I'm not mistaken, next time we meet on Zoom. That is to facilitate any travel that anyone might be doing for the holidays. I was thinking about it and I was like, I guess I'm kind of giving you guys like insane time off because we don't meet next Tuesday either. But where I went to school in college, like I never got to go home for Thanksgiving because it was far away. So in my mind, it was nice that it was a little shorter, but no matter what, we had that entire week. It was all week. It wasn't some Wednesday starting thing. Especially if you did want to travel somewhere. I lived in California. I was going to school in New Hampshire. I could get on a plane and hurry back. There's never enough time. Theoretically, we have such a large commuting student body that I want you guys to be able to have Thanksgiving wherever that is. And so if it makes it easier, we will be meeting virtually on Thursday. Although I'm trying to decide if it'll be virtual and I still come to the room just in case people want to be in the space. We'll see. I was like, right now, Blythe would say yes. You know how I run late. Zoom's quite handy for anyone running late. But does anyone have any questions about that? That should be our last time all together on Zoom, but if you were wondering why, that's the rationale. I'll probably even be here in the room, but I wanted you guys to go where you wanted. And let's see here. Does anyone have any announcements for the good of the group before we get going all the way?
There's a new night today
Ooh.
at the Commuter Lounge.
Ooh.
It's hosted by my club, the Native and Indigenous Coalition. So if you're interested, we'll be showcasing Brother Bear, and
Ooh.
all the snacks and drinks will be provided by the club as well. We'll have pizza, popcorn, candy. So if you guys are interested, that will be from 5 to 7:30.
Hey, Brother Bear, I love it. If there's a flyer or anything, it's probably already in my inbox because I'm behind. But if you'd like me to post it, resend it, put some stars on it. Perfect. Yeah, definitely come check that out, guys. Free food, at minimum. Has anyone ever seen Brother Bear? Get at least one, a couple people. I feel like it's a little, what is it? If I'm sure someone's done the different eras of Disney, and so I feel like it might be in a somewhat later era than maybe Lion King vibes, but maybe not. Maybe it's the last one of that era. That would be my question. Where does Brother Bear fit? Is it the first one of the new era or the last one of the old era? Yeah, yeah, because the artistic style. Yeah. Mhm. I like it. It was one of those ones that I still watch, but I remember thinking I'm in high school. This is weird. Okay. Well, without further ado, we are going to spend today talking about this idea that I'm still chewing on, but I hope it's something you guys will see in print someday. Trauma cubed, looking at trauma as a mechanism, essentially linking outcomes like employment or education to the chaos experienced in some homes over others. Now, if you remember our readings on the Historical Trauma Week and the McCown and McCown piece about toxic stress and chaos in particular, this shouldn't sound unreasonable, but what's difficult is that many of these connections, even looking at substance use, for example, all of these things are both co-occurring. It's hard to determine chicken and the egg, which starts first, what caused what. And in a empirical or like methodological, what's it called, intellectual experiment way, these are things like if we think of how we like to prove, like gold standard that A causes B, randomized controlled trials, experiments, broadly speaking, this is how we like to do that if we can. It's very difficult to do that with trauma on humans, especially. Much of what we do know is unfortunately kind of a trauma experiences of rats in labs. But from a mammalian perspective, that's kind of what they're trying to show us. So we learned the biology of that, but it's still very hard to kind of count the steps between those experiences and those phenomena on like a genetic level to the outcomes that we might actually be able to intervene in from a social policy perspective. And so as a sociologist, we typically look at things that can be observed on the outside. And I launched a whole study to look at how tribal fathers with criminal records found work, knowing that it would be incredibly difficult in light of a changing economy, their prison or jail records, criminal history, broadly speaking, and almost a reluctance to perform certain kinds of jobs over others because of their strong commitment, preference, and almost spiritual kind of commitment to certain vocations and certain industries. Now, I was like, where am I going with this? In one hand, it's a weird thing. Like, why would I care about them finding work? Why would I care about the impacts of their criminal records on that process? For me, I was in college a very long time ago, and I was far from home, like I said. And actually, it was probably around this time, maybe a little later. It started to snow. And I was so homesick, and I was cold. It made it worse. But then I was in this class called Poverty in America, and I was reading about different examples of that across the United States. And Chicago's South Side, some of the work that we've read in this class, I found myself really, even as hard as it was to read in some parts, for someone who was homesick and surrounded by people who had no idea about what it was like to come from a place like that, I could see myself in the experiences and the stories of people coming from a community so radically different than my own, but they had so much in common when it came to the extreme disadvantage or the concentrated disadvantage, as we call it in the literature. So I picked sociology. That was easy enough. I liked that it was giving me a chance to look and ask those questions, because government and the other, econ, when I looked out the window, it wasn't the world I had grown up with, the one they were describing. Sociology, though, gave me room. Even if I couldn't find my world yet, I could find ways and things that looked like it. And so I thought, I'll set off on this sociological adventure. And I would find that book someday that talked about my dad and his experiences, or men like him, what it meant to be unemployed, but then unemployment becomes working under the table, but then working under the table becomes close proximity to drugs, close proximity becomes using, and using becomes addiction. Like, I saw parts and pieces of that, but none of it told from the perspective of rural communities, rural men, tribal men, especially not so. And I made sure I just wasn't missing it on Google Scholar or something. But in all honesty, this book doesn't yet exist. And so that is what I hope to do with my first scholarly contribution, is to put that book on the shelf. It's important to me that it's there because it's the culmination of what will probably be a couple decades worth of wondering and wanting to know. But it's also nice to think that those experiences will be represented because of the work I've done. How important it is that those men are a part of this conversation. And we can't hope that social policy will do anything for us if we don't include them in our considerations. And up until now, because we don't know about them, we haven't thought to look at them, they couldn't help to tell us shit. And so, as someone who was always looking at social policy and hoping we could design the tools that would help my community, it was chilling to know that they had no idea what home was like. So how could they hope to make it better? I am thinking today and next time we're going to end up talking about this project at large. I'm also, like I said, just now touching parts of it that I haven't in some time. So you guys might get some scrambles, but it's also like really cool. Like, I'm synthesizing as we talk. So if I seem like I'm sticking, I don't stick to a script. I'm shit at that. But if it feels like I'm like kind of ad-libbing, it's because some of these thoughts are literally like things I've been thinking about since 2013 for grad school, or before then, if you think of those undergrad yearnings. Like, so it's weird to think of something you've been thinking about that long in new ways. But I'm hoping that's what I'm doing with my writing, but presenting to you guys kind of gave me that chance. And this is actually a version of a presentation that I prepared for someone else to like brag on me. So you don't know what rooms you'll wind up. I'm really hoping, you never know, it'll come up. I've showed you guys this in different ways before, but this isn't something I'm studying because it doesn't impact me. In fact, as I've said, it impacts me incredibly so. I'm not the kind of sociologist who is trying to uphold to some objective standard. I know that the experiential knowledge I've gained by living the life I've lived makes me 10 times better to ask these questions than anyone else who doesn't have them. It also means, though, that I'm connected to my work in ways that can be hard and can be difficult. And people often wonder, like, why are you writing about men first? Like, why you're a woman? That doesn't make sense. I was like, yeah, good point, good point. If I tell you about the daddy problem part or daddy issue, you're like, okay, makes a little more sense. I get it. But also, still, like, when you read the book and you're like, what about the women in these men's lives? Like, you talk about them, hold them down, like they're there, but why start where you did? I have shared in the past with you guys my dear friend Emily, and I don't think I've ever actually played any of these videos. So I was going to take a second to give you guys a taste of the missing and murdered work, because this is something I think I got to do in the book now too. I don't want anyone to think this isn't on my mind and it's not a consideration. But it's hard to know that the person who I could almost say is the reason why I started with our men first is no longer with us. I was in the field and I was starting to, there's this thing called a prospectus when you're in grad school. Essentially, you've done all the book learning and classes you'll take, but now you have to make a proposal for your dissertation. And that can be really hard. It was really hard for me, but it's arguably the last time anyone gets to tell you shit. Don't forget. But I was, back at home for about a year. I'd lucked out and got this really big scholarship. And so I could go back home a year early. And I was trying to see the forest through the trees. I'd been kind of bumming around our tribal court for a bit. I'd been going to ceremony. I was trying to see, like, what's the story? If we know we're going to talk about prisoner reentry, what is the story that I can tell in the confines of this project? And Emily was my dear friend. We had reconnected because her son went to swimming classes with my little brother. And before I'd come back, Emily had bugged my mom and been like, I think you're Blythe's mom. Are you Blythe's mom? Of course. We look alike. And she was like, tell her Emily said hi. And I remember thinking, oh my God, get the fuck out of here. Because I had spent all of high school looking up to her. She was like the cool girl that I never could hang out with because her best friend knew I would steal her. We could have all been friends, but fuck Rachel. It's deep. It goes way back, guys. In either case, so the idea that, she could remember me and even remembered enough to say hi to my mom. So when I got back in town, I started going to swimming lessons, and we just, we'd key while the kids were in the pool. And then for those couple of years, she was my closest confidant. She was what we would call a key informant in a academic sense. And this was before things were getting confidential and anonymous and whatnot. And we would just kind of talk about the things I was seeing and what I wanted to learn about. And I said that, we've got men and women. It's almost a 50-50 split in our reentry numbers. So it's not like prisoner reentry is impacting our men more. That's actually quite different from most populations. 1 out of 10 inmates is women, although that's the highest increasing kind of inmate category. But generally speaking, incarceration is heavily gendered. For my tribe, we were seeing almost a 50-50 split. But even as we were seeing those numbers in our incarceration patterns, Emily and I were sitting there talking about these things, both with a college degree under our belt. Her, graduate of University of Oregon, myself, Dartmouth at the time. And we could think of every woman we knew just like us who had a degree, who was working in our tribe, was holding down the community in a variety of ways. And her guy at home was more likely to have gone to prison. Hopefully he wasn't addicted anymore and he didn't hit her, but these things were not always true. And in fact, more often than not, all of these things were true. And it just didn't make sense. Like, hey, fuck us trying to have like lives and love. But how do you explain that hugely different outcome? And how it'd be one thing if these two groups never interacted, but these are our women, our men, like this is our tribe. And so we've got families where mom is running the tribal department and dad is likely to be going in and out of jail at least once a year. And I remember Emily just saying that we got to start with our men. Our men are sick because even though we have our women and we've got plenty of things going on there too, we got out. And I know that there's many of us who have done that. So like at minimum, like there is a divergence in our past, but it starts well before we are in relationships together. It's when we're applying to college and they're going to juvie. That's when these things start to change and to look different. And in my tribe, in our tribes in this area, we as women were the healers, the doctors. That was who performed that role in the community. And she said that too, that not only are our men sick, but it is our responsibility and always has been to try and help them get well again. And so that broke the tie. I knew no matter what, I would tell our story. She said, our men are hurting, our men are sick. Tell their story first. But like, it was always going to be 2 books was my thought. It still will be 2 books, but at the time I was calling it Female Prisoner Reentry. That was before I got brought into missing and murdered work. And it would almost, in my opinion, it's disrespectful to even talk about female prisoner reentry in Indigenous communities because it's not prisoner reentry, it's missing and murdered. The last place to see our women before they're taken is the jailhouse. The last place Emily was seen before she was never seen again was released on her own recognizance from the county jail. A police officer may have used his discretion to give her a ride somewhere on the res when he could have brought her back to town. I hate to think that the thing that would have made my friend's life different would have been getting locked up. But actually 2 weeks before that, she went missing. She had been incarcerated because she'd burned down, she tried to burn down Indian cemetery, which was like, as you can imagine, a very big deal for lots of reasons. She was not in her right mind and they refused to commit her in any way, despite the DA, the family, and everyone who could asking for that to be the case. She didn't want it to happen. And because she had no record, they said they couldn't keep her. Officer discretion was also the reason why the over 50 times she was picked up in the 2 years before she went missing, sometimes nude, sometimes in inclement weather, sometimes both, why they would just take her to where she asked instead of bringing her to jail or to bring her somewhere where they could help her. And as much as I really would love to talk shit about the police, especially on that case in particular, granted I'm being recorded, I always say that to get mad at law enforcement for missing and murdered problems is like getting mad at someone for not being able to do eye surgery with a chainsaw. That is not their task. At the end of the day, if we're asking them to help us and find our people, like there's many chances before that we could have helped make them safe. Institutionally, when it comes to mental health resources or just any of that infrastructure, if we don't have that nationally, you can imagine rural areas have even less of it. And if we're going to use the criminal justice system as our mental health system, these are the outcomes we're going to see. Now, I did want to pause and just share some of the work, and like, I think like this covers Emily's case and some of the work I've done. So I'm going to turn the lights off and we're going to watch these 3 videos before we change gears to go back to the men's story. But yeah, let's see here. I want to read a poem first. Let's do that, and then we'll do those. This comes from Hanwi, the book. It was one of the poetry books we had for the Living Gallery. And this poem is always intense, but I even added a stanza of my own a couple years back. So bear with me. For the Indigenous woman. When we were little girls, men stopped in their cars and told us to get in. We ran and ran until we couldn't run anymore. I see you. I am you. At the age of 19, it happened again. Hey, you, yeah, you, I'm talking to you. Following us in their car, we ran and ran until we couldn't run anymore. I see you. I am you. He pushes his way into the window and I scream. I see you. I am you. In a dark college basement, he pressed his body up against mine. And when he pinned me against the wall and scraped into my insides, I thought it was my fault for agreeing to dance with him. I collapsed on the floor and my roommate held me as I cried. I see you. I am you. I wonder how many times I could have ended up as another murdered and missing Indigenous woman. Over and over, I asked myself, why have we not done more for you, for the Indigenous woman? The women who watch over us, wipe away our tears, feed us, clothe us, bathe us, teach us. For the women who just are, who no longer get to enjoy the things they once did, to live the lives they'd planned for themselves, to love the people they loved. For the women who have not yet become women, who did not get a childhood, who did not dance, who did not graduate. For trans women and two-spirits who are forgotten from the movement, yet are the most vulnerable, who have always been a part of our Indigenous societies and are never given the respect they deserve and are misgendered even in their deaths. For the women who are not always perceived as women, but something to be conquered. For the women who are none of these things, who are not stereotypes of what society thinks an Indigenous woman is supposed to be, whose deaths and disappearances we should still be outraged by anyway. I'm sorry. I'm sorry we have not done more for you. Scrolling through news feeds, another woman goes missing, murdered, assaulted. Annie Mae was a Mi'kmaq woman, a mother to 2 daughters and an activist, a fighter executed by Native men. Tina was Anishinaabe and 15 years old. She was searching for her birth mother, but Tina didn't make it there. She was found in a river and the man who did it was found not guilty. Savannah was a Spirit Lake, Dakota and Anishinaabe woman, a mother who never met her daughter because she was stolen, taken because she was pregnant, Savannah mutilated and found in a river. Faith was a Hawalaswa Sapani woman, and I met her once. We received the same scholarship. She was as sweet as honey, a student whose degree was taken from her, found murdered and assaulted in her apartment. Jamie Lee was an Oglala Lakota woman who was Two-Spirit and trans, who walked the same streets I once walked. She moved to Sioux Falls for a fresh start, to start her dream. She was stabbed 7 times. Emily was a Hupa woman, a mother of 2. Countless summers she danced for each of you, making the medicine that keeps us all in balance, taken 3 years ago now. Will any of us ever get the chance to say goodbye? How many more whose names I do not know because they're missing, because their names are not reported until they're found in rivers, whose names are never circulated because society does not care? Why have we not done more for you, Indigenous women? Indigenous men, why have you not done more for us? Do you see we will not survive without Indigenous women? What will you do to stand up for your people? Why is there not more outrage for the Indigenous woman? For the Indigenous women whose lives were so much fuller than their deaths? For the Indigenous women who deserve so much more than they are given? You are the earth. You are the strength. You are so much more than your death or disappearance. You are the love of the people, Indigenous woman. I didn't get to give you guys all the rundowns, but Autumn, the author, and I went to college together. She's now a master's in something from Harvard. It has to do with education. So she's a teacher, administrator now, but she was a freshman when I was a senior. So it's thrilling to be able to read her work in my class. And I always send her a little note to say that I've done so. But we're gonna watch now some coverage, both of Emily's case, but I think I'm in one of them. But it's also just like, I don't know. I've alluded to the work I've done in different ways. You guys got a taste of it with the Missing and Murdered Week. But yeah, here's some more. What do I do when I'm not here? I'm gonna keep these tiny, but if it feels like we really gotta make them big. Nah, we gotta make them big. Let's see here. Okay.
If you're a man,
Ooh,
these 3
ooh.
are the only fragrances you need. Egg Uncle, inspired by Tom Ford.
And local police.
Sorry, guys. I was too much overstimulation for a second. It was coming from everywhere. Okay. So one of them we can't make big because it is a tiny video, personally speaking, but I'm gonna bring up now those other ones. Try this again.
Wants funding for investigators
Oop.
and equipment to
Yes. Okay. Hmm. Okay.
We have reports that a school bus drove by, saw her on the bridge naked.
She went missing in early October. Every day, the frustration of wanting some, movement. Things getting done. It's very difficult.
Now, this is Emily. I have a lot of Emily. It's eagle feathers. This is all like beaded.
We had so much fun that day. There's a great picture of her and me from that day, but I don't know where that picture is.
Particularly in reservations and village areas, there's a maze of jurisdictions, of policies, of procedures, of who investigates what. I worked with a family where for 3 days, they couldn't get anybody to investigate the rape because the county, the state, and the tribal police couldn't determine who had jurisdiction.
That's where the savings from.
Families of the missing or murdered Indigenous women, they need somewhere to go. And so when they go to the law enforcement, they're not thinking about the jurisdiction. They're thinking about how can we get help finding our lost relative.
Early on, there should have been a bigger search for her. And I realize it's a very remote area, but you know, Hoopa police, Yurok police have very small, they don't have a lot of help, right?
Quite honestly, the community and the tribe as a government is getting frustrated and they're tired of the appearance that our Native people are not getting the attention that they see with other missing cases locally and across the country.
It's real difficult when you deal with the grandkids. And the grandkids said, "Grandpa, can you take me down the river and can we look for my mom?" And what do you tell them? We're looking every day. There's a lot of people looking. And he says, "What happens? I can't find her."
Emily's a beautiful person. And she needs to come home to her children.
Make this one simple change when filling out your.
Can access.
Tribal and local police and volunteers are preparing to search a vast area of Northern California wilderness for a missing Native woman. 33-year-old Emily Reisling, a mother of two, was last seen near this village on the Yurok Native American Reservation in October.
The community is determined to get an answer. What that answer may be, I don't know, but an answer can bring closure.
Growing up, Emily was a promising student and an expert traditional dancer. Blythe George was a close friend.
She always had a sparkle and a smile, and I always, I gravitated towards her and thought the world of her.
But as Emily grew older, she suffered from mental health problems and substance abuse. In this impoverished tribal community, it was difficult to get her the help she needed. According to the FBI, 5,295 Indigenous women were reported missing nationwide in 2020. Native American women are 10 times more likely to be murdered than any other ethnicity. More than 1/2 of all Native women have experienced rape or other sexual abuse. George is working to assemble a database of the missing and murdered women.
We are disproportionately experiencing violence across the life course. For Indigenous people, it's often a different race hurting you, and that goes back to the settler colonialism.
Indigenous women are preyed upon because tribal police are often underfunded and under-equipped. Overlapping police jurisdictions make criminals think they can literally get away with murder, says Yurok tribal judge Abby Avenatti.
It is somebody who is killing, who knows there's sort of no harm, no foul, because they're not going to be pursued, and in fact, they aren't.
The Yurok tribe wants funding for investigators and equipment to conduct searches and better mental health care access. Last year, President Joe Biden signed an executive order on murdered and missing Indigenous women, directing federal agencies to help coordinate investigations and improve safety. The fates of many of the Native women who have gone missing amid these dense and remote forests may never be known. But their families and tribal officials vow never to stop searching for answers.
We need to get her home, so she'll be, at least have that, you know. That's our responsibility, to bring her home.
Gone, but never forgotten. Rob Reynolds, Al Jazeera on the Yurok Reservation in California.
And then a video, because from the time Emily went missing to now, it's hard to know that we weren't able to do it before she was hurt, but and you know, she's missing. We've never found out what happened. I have my suspicions. Many in the community have theirs as well. I don't think she was taken by nature. I don't think it was inclement weather. She had been messing with the wrong people for a long time and was starting to talk. And there's only one way to handle those things usually. She was living downriver, which is an area at least 2 hours from police calls for service. So if you call 911 because someone's hurting you, you should be ready to defend yourself for at least the next 2 to 3 hours. So that's where she went missing, was the end of the road, the forest, basically gravel road into nowhere. And in the time since, the things that we've been able to build, like at the county level, at the state level even, are it's literally like light speed when you think of how long it normally takes for any movement to happen on an issue, let alone something like this. But it doesn't matter how much we do or how big it gets, because her face is on the background. That's not something that I'll ever get away from until maybe we get a chance to lay her to rest. But we have always had ways to deal with death and grief. And what's hard about missing and murdered is that, especially when it comes to missing, when we don't know where they are, we can't usually start those things until we know where they are. And that means then that the medicine that comes with that, we can't access. But one of the ways we heal ourselves has been through our music and our songs traditionally. So this is a song that when I had done the project that we're going to spend the rest of the day talking about, and Emily was my ride or die, I would go to our traditional ceremonies, our brush dances in particular, and there'd be this song. I didn't grow up going to dances, so even if I'd been to a few, everything always was something new. I was always learning something new. I'll probably have to go to a million and never know it all. But there was this one song that always caught my ear. And why it caught my ear was twofold. I just liked it. I liked the rhythm. Always thought it was cool. But for our dances, the brush dance at least, women sing very infrequently as compared to how often men's songs go on. And that's because a woman's song is worth 5 men's songs. It's that powerful. And so when you get to hear a woman start to sing, there's different ways we dance, but it's just something that sticks out no matter what, because you hear that different medicine. And there was this song that I always just really stuck out. I really liked it. And I don't know how we weren't listening together at some point in all that time, but it wasn't until after she was gone that I learned it was actually her song that they would sing at dances, a song that she had brought to ceremony, but was actually older than her. It had been passed down in her family for generations. And so of all the fucking songs, that one was hers. And I just remember just being missing her like crazy, but also happy to know that I have this part of her, and others sing the song now in her honor. So let's go.
Song, share it with you, in her honor.
Her son and all of her family is up there. I know it's small. But...
And I know our communities here and with And no one I love, and no one I love, and no one.
Mhm.
We're missing relatives. We don't know where you are, but you're always in our hearts. We love you.
Yeah. If it's not abundantly clear, I don't really study fun stuff. I wish I'd pick different sometimes, but I also told myself that I could study other things. You know, if you've heard about my Vegas, God, we'll get through it. Hold on. Oh God, fuck me. Sorry, guys. I was like, they don't work when you want them to work, but then they'll all start playing simultaneously when you don't want them to. Sounds about right. I've got this Vegas project that's kind of about festivals and liminal spaces and things like that. And I like that. It's fun. That's something I'll go all in on once I've got tenure or a couple other things done first. But I just figured I would have time, hopefully, to study other things. But I have been given a huge gift and privilege and honor to have the lessons and teachings. You know, it wasn't easy, and I went a long way from home to come right back. But the work for missing and murdered is the place where I know that's why I have my degree. I thought it was this other work, and this other work is super important, but I feel no more purpose in my life than I do when I'm working on that topic. Even though it's something that is very, very hard, even on good days, it's something that I can't not do. And that's kind of the nature of missing and murdered or any of these issues, broadly speaking, in Indian country. It's just because I'm up here and I have my degree doesn't mean that that's not a part of my life, that I don't have those experiences or love people who have those experiences. And so I'm hopeful that maybe I can take some of that and use it to get some help. Not for white people to come in and fix us or change us or do what they've always been trying to do. Send the money, we know what to do with it. We actually have known how to heal ourselves, and those songs we sing, the rhythm, the chanting, all of that, we are showing now, like on a telomere level, that those are the ways we restore the damage done on a genetic level to our bodies. Something about the rhythm and the syncopation and all that, it's healing to the brain. You know, did we know that we were healing neurons in our dances many moons ago? Fuck no. We knew it worked. We didn't know why. We didn't need to know why, maybe. We just knew it worked. And so I'm hopeful, and something you guys will get to learn this week is a podcast for next time. We have our medicine. There, in many ways, the reason we are sick right now isn't just because of settler colonialism that has been wave after wave. It's because the medicine and the ways we have to make ourselves better again live in the minds of people who are sick. And so the mental health and well-being of all our tribal members is vital to our being able to access any of those teachings. The work I did, it was actually almost always the case that the hardest, prisonest, baddest motherfucker I interviewed was also the guy with the most songs. We'd spent the most time with his elders, who had the most teachings for everything under the sun. And those things were living together inside him. The trauma, the experiences, right alongside our very worldview. And so that's why Emily tasked me as such, that it's our men who are sick. Because, how did Emily get where she is a natural question. And we'll probably come back to it next time more, because we are getting ready to say goodbye. And I just want to give you guys a couple of things to chew on this time. Don't use meth, kids, for any reason ever. That would be my advice. Even if you think you're really smart and you're just going to use it with the guy you're seeing because he asked and maybe it'll be fun. Maybe it's fun for lots of reasons. And you think you're smart enough, you can handle it. It'll only be sometimes. Well, this isn't an all the time thing. It was 3 years from her thinking those thoughts to her going missing. That's it. There's so many things that I would be able to tell on the pathway from there to there, But at the end of the day, she got caught up with the wrong guy. She wanted to love a guy that she'd always, she fell in love and wasn't able to have the person she loved, and she spent her time trying to get away from that and all the other things. And so in some ways, the story that I will tell next is a story about codependence and self-worth struggles and those things that we have to heal alongside coping through substance, because sometimes we can cope through people. If I'm telling you things that you know from life, I hope I'm not triggering you, but I'm also, that's kind of the nature of my life, is that I know certain things because I've seen it, I've lived it, I've known people. I can't get away from it. And now I'm hoping to build on what we know in other places, in other communities about other things, to bridge that gap and help us, but also maybe learn something from these areas as well that would help all of us theorize better. That's the real low-hanging fruit. Sociologists want to be able to theorize better. There are people dying. I want to make sure they live. That's why this work's important to me. Now, I'm going to give you guys the setup. And when we come back together next time, I'll actually tell you what I found. But as I mentioned, my first book, probably both books will focus on this area in particular. But I am starting with tribal fathers with criminal records. And in many ways, I asked a question: how do they manage the process of finding work? That's not still the question, but I started with a relatively mundane question, because while I cared about the process of finding work, that was the discipline I was trying to speak to, I could use it as a hook into a life experience that we know virtually nothing about. And it's not just the tribal fathers and their experience, it's this broader consideration of a reservation, something that most Americans don't really know anything about. And that's not their fault. In some ways, you guys know infinitely more than the average bear. So I won't give you all the preamble, but I hope to not only bring the experiences of this population to bear, but to bring in the reservation in and of itself as something that is worthy of study. It has to be done respectfully so, and it has to be done in a way that pushes back on centuries of fucking it up. But I believe we can do it. And there are sociologists such as myself who are doing it well. But it's a pretty small area. As we've seen in our syllabus, the things I've been able to offer are usually kind of related, but very rarely are they actually about these communities. We have a handful of those, which I'm excited about, but a lot of the stuff that spoke about tribal communities or Native outcomes explicitly were actually borrowed from our peer disciplines, whether that's anthropology, Native American studies, etc. I know that the people in DC don't give a fuck what the anthropologists think. They could care less what Native American studies scholars think. They think settler colonialism is like a bumper sticker or a political bend at best. Okay, what was I thinking that? Oh, they do listen to sociologists. When I was in DC the summer before senior year, I was going to go to law school, I figured, and I was doing an internship at the Urban Institute, which is this important think tank, does good work. And I kind of found myself in rooms where, you're getting to learn and kind of see how things are done. And when people spoke, the people they listened to were the PhDs from certain fields and certain schools. And I knew that if I wanted them to listen to what I said about Yurok, Hupa, and Karuk, or anything in Humboldt, Del Mar counties, I needed to say it a certain way, and I needed to have some letters at the end of my name, preferably from a bomb-ass school. And honestly, I was like, I just told you I didn't read something for a year because of how much fucking trauma I have from grad school, but it was worth it because now I'm in rooms and I'm doing the stuff I want to. So yeah, if you guys were like, gosh, can this ever really happen? Or what do professors do? Some of them don't do any of this, most of them, in fact. But if you think that you have to have a law degree or that you can't be a sociologist and impact the world, I'm hoping my example as a scholar activist at least gives you a counter example. And yeah, also, if you ever want to come to office hours and just talk about any of these things, I'd be happy to give you some more stories. We're at the end, so we're gonna say bye. We got a couple minutes. I'll give it back to you guys. Cause yeah, I got all kinds of shit to say next, but it'll be silly to be like, okay, remember that for next time. Please do the resources for this week. And remember, we'll be meeting on Zoom. I really like the podcast. So if you had to prioritize something, make sure you listen to that. I think it's maybe sounds a little familiar, but it'll be a good thing to build on. All right, if you're on Zoom, I'm gonna clear the room. If you have questions, just go ahead and hang out. Yeah, that's it. All righty, I see a couple of questions for after class. Just go ahead and give me a second and I'll come back to you.